And howdy everyone, welcome to another perfect launch of a ComicBase live stream. This is number 58. Any questions? Anyway, I'm your host, Pete Bickford. I am the author of ComicBase, and I do a few other things around here. But anyway, this show is going to be largely based around your questions, so please do ask them in the chat. If you're on YouTube, just go ahead and also while you're at that, please hit the subscribe and the notify button so you get notified when everything comes out. And if you wouldn't mind, mash that like button, because it does help distribute the notifications to everyone else on the subscription list to let them know that we are actually on the air, which we are pretty much every Wednesday at 4 o'clock Central Time, unless I'm riding or attempting to ride amusement park rides out in Pennsylvania, which I did a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, how's everyone doing out there? Want to say hey to Mike. Let's get my keying turned on here so we can see stuff. Hey, Mike Oro, nice to see everyone. Zandu, nice to say hi. Seattle, coming in loud and clear. Nice to see you. It looks like people finally get a break on the weather. So it's, fall is starting to turn the corner, which is good because on Friday my kid goes back to school. So this summer went way the hell too fast. Hope your summer went well as well. So let's get down to it. Hey Rob and Ed, nice to see everyone. Okay, let's get to it. A little bit of, let me scroll up here, a little bit of comic-based news, a little bit of industry news, and then we'll get to questions. So the comic-based news, the big one here is, guys, we just passed 750,000 covers in Comic-Base Archive Edition. By way of demo, excuse me, just a moment. Alright, I'm back. This is ComicBase Archive Edition number 8. This thing was ludicrous. It was the first Archive Edition of ComicBase. It came out on DVD for the first time ever, and it shipped on, yes, two single-sided DVDs. Lavishly printed in an incredibly overly elaborate case. Cost $300. The folks who actually turned out these cases for us did so on equipment that was usually used to produce like funeral urns and things like that. It was just cool. We wanted to try because we didn't know if anyone would ever buy a DVD-based program for storing comic book collections, and so we wanted to really give this thing as nice a feel as we could ever imagine. Unfortunately, of course, like these lovely steel cases that we had manufactured were like $10 each, just for at our cost. So if you have one, it is a true collector's item, and we shall not be doing those anytime soon because they were really cost a fortune. Anyway, but as the years went by, those single-sided DVDs. By the way, this one came out with, to read the cover on it, a 2 DVD set containing the entire ComicBase database, plus covers from over 55,000 rare and modern comics, exclusive creator interviews, and more. 55,000. That was every comic book we had ever seen in the first decade of us doing ComicBase, and they were smaller images back then because the standard comic size when we started out was something like 342 pixels by 500 or something like that. It was a crazy dimension, which was sized exactly to if you had a 9-inch Mac SE, which was the first machine we would run on. It was the maximum amount of size on the 9-inch screen that it had that you could possibly get between the border of the little granite background we had and the up and down, for the whole thing. It was they were puny by comparison. So these days we're just past 750,000 covers. We've been scanning them at 4K resolution for better part of a decade now. So some tens of thousands of them, and more, just really every day are coming in at full 4K resolution. It's just ludicrous how much data that represents, and we always have to face coming up with really crazy ways of describing what do these big numbers mean, because after a while, I mean, as Penn Teller so beautifully put it, it's like as humans we don't have a great sense for what numbers mean in scale. We understand one, we understand a couple, we understand a few, we understand a bunch, and then we understand a shit ton. It's at a certain point, a lot just looks like a lot. I mean, is it 100 people or 500 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people or 100,000 people? I mean, we understand that this one looks like a bigger shit ton of people than the other bunch, but we don't really get a sense of scale. So you have to come up with crazy ways of describing when you have something that has incredible scale, like the number of comics in ComicBase. Well, what is the scale? And I remember a number of years ago when we had maybe half as many comics, we figured out, by doing a little bit of elaborate math, we figured out that you could paper 3 sides of the Empire State Building to a height of like 50, 100 and some stories or something like that, with the comics that were contained in ComicBase, if you had the actual comic books, you're in hand. Later on, when ComicBase 2015 rolled out, there's a video clip where I ran around with my editor and we drove all around the Bay Area between our offices in downtown San Jose up to Facebook, over to Apple, and then up to Facebook, and on the old Sun campus, and then over to Google, and then up to San Francisco, across the Bay Bridge, and halfway in the middle of the Bay Bridge, I remember it was something like 48 miles of comic books was what the comics in ComicBase at the time represented. About halfway across the Bay Bridge is where that path would have run out. Now, using the same idea for giving a sense of the metric of how much stuff 750,000 comic books is, I may have spent a lot of time with Google Maps trying to find a really good example, but the best one I came up with was, if you sat there at the foot of the Matterhorn ride in Disneyland, California, and then you walked out of there, out the parking lot, and hopped on the highway, got down, drove all the way down to the San Diego Convention Center to the middle of Hall H. That got you most of the way there, but no, it's further. So then you get back in the car after you waited for 2 days to see whoever you're seeing at the Comic-Con, and you drive down past the border in Mexico, and you actually drive quite a ways past the border in Mexico, and so you get to the box seats of the Estadio Chevron, which apparently Tijuana's really apparently nicened up quite a bit since I was there, in the 70s. And they now have like a major, sports stadium, home of the Toros. And by the time you get there and you wander around the parking lot a few times, you're basically at 121 miles, which is what 750,000 comic books looks like. It's actually 121,030.33 miles if you want to get into the nitty gritty of it, which is actually slightly longer than the trip I described, which is 118 miles according to Google. That being said, you could split hairs all day long and say, well, some of those pictures are really magazines, but then magazines are a little larger than the standard size of a comic book, blah, 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 blah. But you get the point. This is a lot of comic books. So anyway, guys, we could not have done, we scan hundreds of comic books every week ourselves. We've been doing this for almost 30 years now, but we wouldn't be anywhere near where we're at if it weren't for all of you guys. So thank you so much for everyone who's, contributed your own scans, who contributed your own, research to the database and so forth. This is a staggering project, and we did a lot of work, but man, we would not be where we are without you guys. So thank you so much for all that, and that's the news. So on that note, and here's the kind of the part where I do a little business maybe on the back of this one. We've always, ever since we did, so I dropped the TV remote on the control. Ever since we did the archive edition the first time, we always were faced with a problem where, like, in order to do ComicBase, we're always doing the archive edition. That's the one we run with. It's our best work. It's the one that represents all of what we do here at the office and so forth. At the same time, we realized that, look, not everyone's got the massive needs for everything we do that we're using. I mean, we're going to use every feature of the program you can imagine. We're using it on our mobile phones. We're using it across our tablets and our iPhones and whatever else. We're logging tens of thousands of comic books into it. We're printing labels. We're doing the whole 9 yards. And we also love seeing all the picture reference. We deal with much bigger comic collections than a lot of people deal with. Not everyone. We have customers with way more comics than we have, but yeah, we use it to the fullest. But that's the ComicBase we're used to, and which we want to show off. We have to make that in order to make any of them. But at the same time, we also want to make it so that someone who's just kind of getting into the field has got a place to land. So over time, we've kind of developed this kind of a small, medium, large model for what we do. There's actually a free version, which was just the demo, but we now call it officially ComicBase free. All caps, because you must say, you must, anything you do, it's free. You have to always all cap it. But if you have less than 500 comic books, we'll just give you the program. It won't have a lot of the more advanced features in it, but it does the basics. It'll tell you what your collection's worth. You can try the whole thing out and get to know it, and we will charge you the grand total of $0 for that. Beyond that, there's the Express Edition, which is it's basically it's it's kind of like ComicBase when we very first started out, when the creator creds weren't quite as elaborate, and we hadn't built in all the major fields and so forth. It's a very capable program for logging and reporting a comic collection. Although one thing it has that we didn't have when we started out is the ability to get weekly updates of all the pricing, 52 times a year. So that's pretty cool. And that will set you back like $60. The Pro version is kind of like, that was our mainline version before the archive came along. It was all the collection features in the program. We added mobile features as time went on, custom fields, some advanced barcode stuff. But the one thing there is we always had the idea that the pictures were there to help you find the series, kind of like when you open up an Overstreet price guide. You're not expecting to see the pictures of every single thing in the database, and so that's where the Pro kind of lands at, and that's kind of our medium one. And then finally there was the Archive Edition, which is, what if we just showed every single picture we've ever encountered? So we started, once upon a time we had 55,000 pictures on 2 DVDs. This has gotten crazy over time, where we're moving heaven and earth to squish them onto 4 DVDs or a big set of downloads, or later on in Blu-ray we can get them onto a big Blu-ray disc, which we also squish, and frankly we cheat the situation a bit, where if you download them off the website, we actually give you a higher quality than the physical media would let you have otherwise. So the pictures that you download, if you just hit them one at a time off the site, is part of the weekly download. On average, as of last year, we started serving up about twice the image quality you get even if you had the discs, just because otherwise we'd be shipping you like a dozen DVDs to get the thing on it. It wouldn't be any fun to install. But that one, that's everything. And where it really starts to shine these days is you can use that for cover reference on all these crazy variants that we've got going on. So if you're looking at some crazy title like Deceased, and it's got 28 variants of every issue, it's really nice to know that this is the picture of the one that we're calling the black and white trade dress incentive cover by Joseph Michael Linzer or whatever. You can actually just see the cover and say, oh yeah, that's my cover, and it's much nicer to match up that way. And also, I find this very invaluable, is every time I handle a comic book in my own collection, I always print up an identification label with it. So it takes that picture and it puts it in a little small thumbnail, prints it along with the label, and that also appears on all my reports and things like that. And so when I'm looking at my collection, there's no doubt what I'm looking at. I don't need to decipher the variant code. I'm just looking at a picture of the comic book, and so that is just really, really freaking cool. Now, obviously, it takes a lot of space. It's more than a lot of people need, but what we wanted to do, because we're here, and this is the part where we're doing business, is we want to give everyone who had other versions of ComicBase a chance to get the Archive Edition of ComicBase, like the really good one, the one we use all day long, for as cheap as we can offer you. And what we're doing is, part of our sale is we're making it so you can renew or upgrade your current one, get an extra year on what you're doing for $99, usually $129 or better, $149 if you're coming in from older versions. But you can also upgrade from the older versions of things like Pro and things like that, and it's the same, $99 to go from the Pro to even old versions of the Pro. If you had ComicBase 1.0 and you wanted to upgrade, you could get the current Archive Edition, 750,000 comic books on it for that same $99, and so forth. Now the Express, if you're coming in from there, just because we can't let you pay $60 and then get the $300 program for $99. That would be crazy. That wouldn't be fair to anybody. That one will set you back a total of $149 to get the $300 version of the program. But so that's what we're doing. Next 6 days, up until next Monday, we're running a big sale. I sent an email about this right before the show. Please look that over. And if you're in the market at all and you haven't seen the archive, or you haven't used the archive in a while, strongly suggest grab the opportunity to get this, because I'm probably not telling too many tales out of school to say, look, we've been banging on about inflation, for a while on the whole thing. Every time I stop at the market, I'm like, whoa, it costs what now? I don't think the prices are going to stay where they're at this year. I mean, I'm not, we haven't made firm decisions or anything like that, but I mean, I gotta tell you, everyone at every company you're dealing with right now is staring at their costs and sitting there going, geez, man, something has to change, where suddenly we either become way more popular than we are, or we start nudging the pricing up. And so it's been about 10 years since last time we bumped prices, so don't be super surprised if this is the last time you see a sale like this. So if you're in the market at all, strongly encourage you to get on. That is all the business I'm going to do on that one. All right, let me do a quick check of the chat. I'm going to do a little bit of industry stuff, and then let's get 2 questions. All right, so let's see. Ed says, I have new, more accurate cover images to submit. However, existing inaccurate images, barcodes missing. Should I submit via some newer corrected function or send email? One of the things that we were talking about with, and I got to remind myself to get back to the industry news after this one because we got into a good question on this one. You heard me talking a couple shows back when we talked about variants. About how we're busting out the item description itself, the thing that makes it, the black and white incentive version, Joseph Michael Linsner cover, that's going to get moved out of the notes field because we want the ability to keep that updated, and if anyone ever submitted the wrong description of a cover, or we want to have an official way that we talk about that cover, instead of having like 13 different slight variations of a theme to talk about the same cover, we want to have one official source of truth, and we want to put that in a field that essentially we own because it designates the issue. So we are going to be doing that in the near future. That'll be the next major version of ComicBase, codename Burning Man. If you'd like to be in on the development of that, by the way, send a note to support@comicbase.com or better yet, P. Bickford at comicbase.com, and I will go ahead and look you over, and it'll chat a little bit, and I'll probably add you to the list of the Slack group to get in on that. I am starting that group up later on this week, so you will see that coming on. But what will happen is, when you have a question of which of the 28 variants of deceased number 4, which one's which, obviously we have had a lot of discussion about like how we try to use the barcode to tease out which is the A version, the B version, the C version, the D version. When you get to like the 28th version, it gets very strange. Anyway, one thing that we're going to be doing as part of the whole bit where we take the item description out is we're also setting up an editorial standard where if it has been described as being a certain issue and the picture does not match the issue, like the picture really belonged to a different variant, the thing that will change is the picture, not the description. So in other words, once it's described as a certain thing, except in extremely weird situations, expect it that we will bring the pictures in line to match the description and not vice versa, because everyone gets to see the picture. The picture shows up in all sorts of data extracts on Atomic Avenue, things like that. The description shows up there, but not everyone is always looking at the picture, and so when we're talking about what comes in line with what, please don't submit any corrections that change what the meaning of variant C is. In other words, if it's the Marko Djurdovic cover, don't submit a new version C which says, well, no, I really thought that should have been the Linsner cover. Don't do it. We'll reject it. Even if you say, well, but your picture is wrong. Well, then give us a better picture, because then we'll replace the picture, but we're not changing the description. That has to be the editorial line we stand with, because otherwise, we always have this problem with, like, we never want to mix up somebody's collection if they've started cataloging already, and so we're going to bring everything into compliance with what the description is, whether it's the barcode or anything else, and that's kind of where we're going to, you say, what's our source of truth? The source of truth is going to be the written description. So that's going to be where we go. Now, if you have updates to either the picture or the barcode that go with a given title, as long as they are bigger in terms of pixels than the existing picture, then the easiest thing to do is just take your scan in at a higher resolution than the one we had. Usually, if you just scan it full DPI, that'll usually get you there. If you submit that, if you put that into your copy of ComicBase, highlight it and say submit new or corrected data, that'll get to our editors. They will handle that one. That's very efficacious. If for some reason it doesn't allow you to submit a picture that way, like if you submit it and it doesn't say, hey, you have a picture, can we have it? It could be that we have a very high-res picture of the picture you consider either it's a bad scan or it's wrong or whatever else. At that point, send a note to support@comicbase.com, say, hey, here's the issue, and let the editors handle it as a manual change. There is an upper limit to how big we will take pictures, so because we don't want people, micro scanning, the microdots on the whole thing and sending in like 1200 DPI pictures. That doesn't help anybody. That just runs up the size of the image. So there is an upper limit where if we already have like a 3000 pixel tall scan of something else, we're not looking for a bigger one. So we won't even if you have a 4000 pixels tall scan, we won't accept it. We'll just sit there and say, no, we're good, thank you. So until 8K monitors become normalized, at which point we'll say, hey, bring on the 8K scans. But until that point, the best thing to do, the easiest thing in general to get things done fast is always put the right information in your copy of ComicBase, right-click on it, say submit new or corrected data. It goes to our editors in a way that's very easy for us to digest. And if that somehow isn't possible, send a note with the right data to support@comicbase.com. So that's the long answer to a short question. So apologize for that. Let's see. God, okay, I'm going to do, before I get to more questions, you guys are asking great questions, but let me get the industry news out of the way, otherwise I'm just going to forget. So the industry news on this whole thing is Free Comic Book Day is actually on this year. I can't believe it myself. It's always like the first week in May, and they postponed it because COVID. And these days, of course, they're locking down half the blue states in the country again because Delta or whatever they're doing. But good God, people are trying, and so they have scheduled again for August 14th. And if you look behind me, the stacks of boxes behind me, many of these are Free Comic Day books. So if you guys were wondering when it's coming up, we've got them here. These are the spares of the boxes I've opened so far. What we typically do is we keep a couple filed copies around here. The rest of them, because when you're a dealer and you're ordering your Free Comic Day comics, there's a certain minimum you're grabbing, and of course we want to have them all in the database, so we always order, them for ourselves. But then what we do at that point is anytime you order anything from us on Atomic Avenue, we basically take the box, we throw it on the scale, and we start throwing Free Comic Day books into it until it hits the next postal rate. So, if you're like, 1 pound and 1 ounce, we'll keep throwing books in there until it hits 2 pounds, at which point we'll back off an ounce or so, and then you get as many free books as we can afford to shove to you. So that's a pro tip on how to score some actual Free Comic Book Day books if you're getting them through the mail on Atomic Avenue. So at least that's how it works from P. Bickford. Other sellers may do similar things, maybe they don't, but that's what we do. But those are coming into the database. Actually most of them are in there now. We talked about Free Comic Book Day books last week out, but the actual books themselves finally showed up on my desk today. So now I get to bag and board the dang things. So good news. All right, so let's get back to your questions. Oro. So Oro says, on a ComicBase website profile page, what formula determines how many chevrons show up next to the screen and the screen names? I have 15 of the 23 badges, 65% of one little chevron, LOL. So I think what you're talking about there is your rank, and that is actually your Atomic Avenue seller rank. Let me switch over let me get to screen name up so I'm not giving away any trade secrets. Give me just a second. I think I can pull up an Atomic Avenue thing with my account on it. Profile. Now let's see here. Oro, if you wouldn't mind, so I was thinking you were thinking of your Atomic Avenue rank, but maybe you weren't. So let me show you what I got going on, and we'll take it from there. So over on my screen, let me hide all the windows I don't want you to see. Okay, so like my water bill. All right, so here we are, and so here's what here's what I've got for badges, and yes, I've got a bunch that I don't have either. But anyway, as far as the so I think what you're talking about is the little rank symbol over here. If so, what that is that's your Atomic Avenue seller rank. And I'm there's a list of ranks. When we were setting up Atomic Avenue, we had some fun with what the different breakdowns of sales, performance and everything were going to be. And we basically patterned them loosely off of British military, British Air Force ranks and a little bit of Navy thrown in there. Basically, we're mimicking, a Space Force before there was a Space Force kind of thing. when you have when you start out as just I think an airman, but then you eventually proceed up through the ranks depending on how many satisfied sales you've had, and when you get very high up in the line, you can become a wing commander, which I think is you have to have something like 5,000 sales points in order to get that going, and you only get sales points for people who you made happy. So if for more information on that, if you ever start selling on Atomic Avenue, that's how you get different chevrons on that whole thing. So if you have just 1 or 2 chevrons on the whole thing, all it means is you don't sell a lot on Atomic Avenue. So don't take it personally. It's nothing much. That's just because the profile page is very similar between the two systems. You see the same icon. So that's all that means. Okay. All right, back to that one. Agent Camp says, I still have that archive. Right on. By the way, there were a couple of these ones. So they were done in both silver, and we did a couple of them in gold. This is actually the rare variant gold edition. If you have one of the gold ones, it means you met us at a show. Either that or we really, really, really liked you when we sent it out. But that's pretty cool. All right, let's see here. Bigger house. All right. Okay. Andre says, in Sidekick, the time in the check for updates changes by itself. I set up to run in the morning at 7:02 a.m., but when I go back to see if it's done, if not, then this time will change. This is, let me put it on here so other people can see it. Turn off the king, Bickford. There we go. What that is, and let me go ahead and pull up the whole thing so everyone else can see what the heck he's talking about. Sidekick. Let's bring you over to the screen where we got it going on. Come on. Oh, great. Of course, I just installed Sidekick right before the show on this whole thing, so of course it wants to do a little work on my machine. Give me just a sec. But yes, if you go into Sidekick Settings, and it will get done with looking through my 17 databases here in just a sec. When you look to its settings, it's got your schedule of when it's due to run. And what he's referring to there is, let's say I had it start out to go at 4 a.m. Well, what will happen is it will try to do whatever that job is at 4 a.m. But then if it can't for some reason, it basically says, okay, set it back by an hour, set back by half an hour. Well, I forget what the whole thing is. But basically says, I'll come back and do it later, because the most normal thing that's happening is you just had your machine turned off, or you had ComicBase still running, but for whatever reason it couldn't do its job at the time. But unlike the taxi, driver who's due to pick you up at 9:02 a.m. to take you to the airport, Sidekick will actually wait until you're ready, and at which point, when he finally gets a chance to do his job, then he will do it. But then that becomes the new time that that you starts for doing things. So for instance, all right, and let's go ahead and pull this up on the schedule now. So for instance, I've got the schedule set up to check for updates daily, and right now it's due to start working at 1:25 a.m. But let's say at 1:25 a.m., my machine's busy, or I turned off my machine, or I had ComicBase running, so whatever reason it couldn't do its thing. Now let's say I close my close ComicBase, or I turned on my machine at 7:30. It's still going to try to do a daily check, so every 24 hours. So if it finally finished the check, and got a chance to do it at 8:30 a.m. or something, then the next time it'll try to do the check is at 8:30 a.m. the next day. That's what happens with it. So the schedule will wander around a little bit. It seemed like the best combination of things for the most people, but I am definitely open to revisiting that decision, or at least have an option for like firm scheduling, like do it at 2 a.m. and if you can't do it at 2 a.m., just come back at 2 a.m. tomorrow. I only want to do this work in the middle of the night. If that's an option that appeals to people, kind of fire off a note to the chat. I'm curious about that one, because it's again, it's one of these design decisions. You have to make a decision. I'm not 100% certain it was the right decision for all people in all cases. So, let us know what you think on that. But that's why the schedule wanders around a bit. Let's see here. Arden says, send an email to support to the board about a formula. So I'm got a response from a few weeks ago. I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but if you can post it in the chat, I'll have a look at it. Let's see here. Pictures match description. What a concept. Yeah, we try, Agent DeCamp. All right, let's see. 30 points with Pete? What? I'm not sure what that's referring to. Oh, submission points. He's looking at my submission points of this one here. No, one thing is you will regularly see me blow away aspects of my own account because I'm the guy doing the testing. The one thing you'll never see is you'll never see me artificially, move up the points on my account. So, realistically, I ought to probably have, I don't know, 12, 13,000 correction points, but from just the ones I did as like a civilian. But because I didn't keep record of it, and because at different points I had to blow away my own account, it's at 30 at the moment. I'm not worried about it. At one point, it's funny because I still have the badge for making the leaderboard at one point. Because at one point I was in the top 200. I don't believe I was ever in the top 10, which I believe is the last badge over there. And I know I never had like the 2 million or whatever the hell crazy a number of points you need, or I think it's 200,000 correction points you need to do to get the Commander Shepard Award, which again I think there's 3 people in the history of the entire world who have ever gotten that. All right, so let's see here. Lance says, if I miss a weekly image content download, is there a way to pull down at a later date other than going title by title and manually checking for updated images? Sadly, no. Yeah, it's one of those things where back before we had the amount of traffic we have, we were able to allow the image update to basically be a little sloppier, and so it would kind of overlap by a couple 3 weeks. And so if you miss some images in the last 3 weeks, no problem, we'll grab them if you just download it a couple 3 weeks later. And then at some point we got to the part where we're pulling down a couple 3,000 images every single week, and we just couldn't afford to do that. It was too much strain on the servers. And so until we get something cut a little looser in terms of being able to, I mean, if symmetrical gigabit ever comes to a data center near us, then I'm happy to revisit that decision all day long. Until that time, though, I gotta watch out for the bandwidth, because we have thousands of people hitting it at the same time. The load can get crushing, and the picture download is back when we were on Amazon services, that was where most of our spend came from. The large check I would write to them every single month that was larger than like all my employees' paychecks. that was from that downstream bandwidth. So. Anyway, at the moment you got to catch every week. Otherwise, the only thing you can do is just, as you hit titles that you're missing, just Control A, select all, download, and hit them as you need them. But there isn't like a great way to go back in time and get weeks you missed. That said, once a quarter or so, we do put up disk images of everything in the database. So if every so often you want to go ahead and re-download again all the images for whatever product you're using, whether it's the Archive Edition or the 4K Archive Edition, that'll catch you up with everything we ever had. It'll also fix bad images or things like that we had over the time. So that's not a bad thing to do every quarter or every half a year or so. Just go ahead and download that. And one thing we can do on those is, because they're disk images and they don't need to be quite as linked in with our stuff, we can stage them on a content delivery service server that isn't ours, and so it doesn't put the load on our servers as badly. So that doesn't murder us as badly as it once did. You guys might remember the first time we started making the Blu-ray Archive Editions downloadable, and we like immediately brought down our own site because we capped out our own bandwidth. It was like, and then we went and switched accounts, and we got them to relinquish the account, and then within a day we capped it out again. And it's like, well, okay, right, we have to stop that. That was years ago. We haven't done that for a while, but it's something that the experience was somewhat visceral, and so we didn't want to repeat that very much. All right, let's see here. Like a button to set it at fixed time. Okay, all right. Thanks for that input, Andre. It's something I will definitely give a thought of. Let's see here. And Aaron has a formula. Says, current formula I have for the advanced formula to find only the CGC 9.8 to 9.0. Any help would be greatly appreciated. Yeah, I'll look into that one. What makes that tricky? Yeah, I mean, it's doable. What you would want is you would want to find CGC. You would want to find let me demonstrate what your search ought to look like, Aaron. So what Aaron's looking for is he's looking for in the advanced find a formula that would give him his CGC 9/8 to 9/0s to 9/8. I'm assuming that's what you meant by it, 9 to 9/0. So the way you get to advanced find, if you have the Pro or Archive edition, I usually just do Control F to bring up the find dialog. You can also get to it by going find other down there. So then there. Go to find, then go to advanced find. And then you say find items where, and then here you go to your field, and you would say condition, which is around here someplace, condition, all right? And here's the tricky part, because you're doing a text search, and so you have to use some weird SQL-y type things. What you'd say is like space CGC space 9%. That's probably how I would go about doing it. And if you like, I'll go ahead and save the search and send it to you. What this says, if we decode, whoops, let me switch these things so you can actually see what I'm doing. Reviewing slightly, to get to advanced find, go to find other, and then go down to here, say find advanced find. Okay, then say items where, and you can get to what field you want to change just up here under fields. And here's, because you're doing something a little tricky, because you're saying, I don't want 9.0s, I don't want 9.8s, I want everything that's, it starts with CGC and a 9 something, right? The way you'd say that in SQL, and that's really what this advanced find is, it kind of gives you a window into SQL directly with everything that is good and bad about that. So it's incredibly powerful and incredibly obscure at the same time. But this is the search you want, is you want to say your condition, and the magic word is like. It's not equals, it's not greater than, it's like, match. And then a single quote, CGC space 9, and then a percent. A percent's a wild card. So basically that should match anything where it's CGC 9 point anything, 95, 97, 900, you know, whatever else, it should bring back all those results. If you wanted to order it by title or issue, you could go further on that one. But if you just do a find on that, it should get you what you want. Unfortunately, we'll bring back nothing in this database because this is a stock database that has no CGC books in it, but in yours, you should do better. I will go ahead and save the search, and if you run into trouble, let me know, and I will send you a copy of that search, and you can load that up. Just go to find, advanced find, load search, and choose Aaron search, and it should get you what you need to go. So hopefully that helped. Okay, let's see what else here. Oro says, many websites and program logins into C password icons. We all have way too many passwords. Remember, is it possible for the CB program, the CB website, please? It's mostly not actually a website feature. It's mostly a browser feature. It's your browsers doing that magic. It's both obscuring the password on you and offering you the widget that allows you to see it when not available. That's true for the website at least. The website programmer didn't do anything to make that happen. Your browser did. That said, on the ComicBase mobile application, well, think about it. I mean, I don't know what's possible on that, but it's not a bad idea. No, fair enough. Agent Cam says, I'm still trying to get my points reinstated. I thought we handled that for you, but if not, please, send a note to us, ComicBase.com, and hold our feet to the fire. Let's make sure that gets done. I thought we had that for you, but anyway, let's see. Okay, so, let's see here. And Steve Dazinger, of course, by the way, props to Steve Dazinger. You guys know him as Stealth DBA. He has been such an invaluable resource for helping people do weird things with SQL. He's, you will never do badly to reach out to him for help on these things. Let's see here. Andre says, when you push an update 2 or 3 times in 1 week, does it mean that the first ones are missing to download? Okay, so when I do something crazy, like, and you'll see me doing this more right now because we're testing a switch over to the new version of ComicBase that's coming up later on this year, and it involves different download formats. So you'll see me doing the testing behind the scenes a lot. So sometimes you'll see, within hours of each other, they'll be, oh, there's an update available. Oh, there's an update available. Oh, there's an update available. When that happens, the pictures for that week are all encapsulated in all of the downloads. So if you download any of them, you'll be getting all the pictures. And the same thing goes with the data. The data is always cumulative. So if you were to not download anything for like a year and a half, if you download one content update, you're always going to get the latest data. It's going to update your entire database data-wise, but you'll only get that last week's worth of pictures. Now, but last week, that by what that means is it's anything that was added to our master database within that last week. So if I push 5 updates in the same day, they all have the same picture list. So you don't need to worry about that in particular. All right. So let's see. All right. Send an email in today. Okay, Asia Scam says, there's a new grading service, been around for a little over 2 years, named EGS. Will new grades be added in the pricing schedule? This is the first I'm hearing about it. Do me a favor, does anyone out there use EGS? If so, can you give me just a quick, what do you like about them? What do you not like about them? Do you think they're legit? If you think they are, then send that to support@comicbase.com, and if so, then it's certainly easy. The reason we created grading sets is to make it easy to add things like that in. And for those of you who've never seen what grading sets are, this is a feature that we introduced with ComicBase 2020. If you go to Setup and you go to Grading, you can, here's all the standard grades. In this particular database, I have a few, oddballs in here, like a restored CGC and a few CGC grades on there. But you can actually say under grading sets, which grades do you ever use? And so in this particular database, I guess, for the sake of argument, I added in at least the grades for CG standard and restored. But there's also the ability to add in for comics and magazines, PGX, CBCS, etc. So it's easy for us to add EGS to that list of things, depending on what sorts of items they are willing to grade. We certainly could make that happen, and the way we make it manageable is by not having it checked by default. Because what we want to do is we want to make it so when you are scrolling down your list of grades you've got in any particular thing, we don't want this list to be 7,000 items long. So that's what grading sets were introduced for. But that's it. Yeah, we're happy to look at that and see what we can do. Okay, so let's see here. Decent prices and options. AegisGradingSystems.com and the YouTube channel. Excellent, good to go. All right, let me do a quick check back and see if there's anything else I missed in the chat before we get to the ones people sent me in otherwise. Okay, I think I got it. If I missed something, please flag me down in the chat, and I'll hit it as well as I can. Let me also do a quick time check, see how we're doing here. This is the problem with turning off your phone before the thing. Oh, we're doing okay. All right, so, all right. Joe had asked, a question that comes up about information, puts in the notes section, say for the Avengers first run issues 48 and 54. Actually, I think I answered this one in a previous podcast. It was about letters of comment, LOC. But yes, if you ever see LOC in a note, what that means is it's a comic industry professional who, typically before they were famous for being a comic industry person, had put in a letter as a fan into the fan page. So that becomes somewhat interesting to folks. All right, so other things are going on. Michael Allen asked, quotation marks in titles. I am having a terrible time with them. Help me out. All right, so let's give an example of something. Okay, here we are. Can't lose you. All right. Okay, so let's go over to the screen here and let's stare as closely as we can at can't lose you. Now, if you look at this thing, you will notice that apostrophe between the N and the T is curved. It's curved because that makes an apostrophe. If it wasn't curved, it would be a foot mark or an inch mark, or frankly be a lazy typing mark. Because when typewriters came out, they didn't have all the keys for all the diacriticals that we'd have, and so they got very they basically would fake quotation marks by using foot and inch marks because they were easy. And then later on, when things like the Macintosh came around, and you could once again have decent typography in your presentations, it became very unhip to use foot and inch marks, or as some people call them, straight quotes. To use those when you shouldn't do them. We, because we care, have been using curved quotes the entire time. And there's some good advantages to this. The advantage is, first of all, it looks nicer. It's more correct. But the other thing about it is quote marks tend to be used as, they call them delimiters for computer programs. In other words, the way that you've all seen the thing where someone says, yes, when you get to that screen, type, my password, or temp PW, and they'll put the the quotes around it. When you actually are telling a computer program that the characters I'm about to give you right now are really meant to be taken as a thing by themselves, you will typically surround them in either single or double quotes depending on what language you're using. And by the way, if you also want to be just an evil SOB and hack other people's systems, it used to be pretty easy to exploit that in searches by doing a thing called an SQL injection attack, where what you would do is, they would ask you, like, what's your name or something like that. And what you would do is you'd put in a single quote followed by a semicolon, followed by an SQL command like drop users, which drop table users, which would destroy the users table. Because what would happen is, if the programmer of the site was doing something, was not very careful, and they didn't know that users, that people who type on websites could be doing evil things, their back-end code might be doing something like, okay, ask the user for their name, right, and then whatever they put in their name, select star from the user table where user equals, and then they would insert whatever text you just gave them. And so what that happens then is, if you would actually put a quote into that, and if they'd written the query exactly like the naive way of doing that, is that then got interpreted on the back end as select all the entries from the user table where user equals, and because the very first thing you put in was a quote, it would say where it's equal to nothing. Right? Semicolon, which means go on to the next statement, and at that point it then would destroy your user table and move on, or do other evil things. It's funny because this was a fiendishly evil way to get into people's websites. For back in the 90s, you could probably crack half the websites out there with this sort of nonsense. You could list passwords. You could list all sorts of confidential information. You could do all sorts of crazy things, or you could just randomly vandalize people's sites. And it was very, very hard to defend by. Initially, if you were a programmer on a website, you would try to look for all the things that looked like quotes, but then they got very ingenious and they would start embedding in Unicode characters, which would then get interpreted as quotes, even though they look nothing like a quote when you're scanning for them, or you do other things like that. And it's funny because I'll actually see our server logs for the different services we run, and people will be trying to run these kind of injection attacks on us 24/7. I mean, hundreds of times a day you'll see people attempting to insert, foo into user input lines, and the way you defend against them primarily is you never ever take the user's input by itself, and typically you never even, no matter how much you're screening it, you're always using what's called a parameterized SQL query, where the worst thing that could happen is if you somehow they managed to slide in data that really also had commands in it, it would just give a syntax error, because you've kind of sandboxed what it is you're looking for in a way that it can never break out of there without. I mean, the worst it can do is throw an error on your site, but it will never do the command they're trying to do, and that's typically the way people defend against it in today. I mean, typically there's layers and layers of defense against it, but that's usually the ultimate defense on it, is that and no matter what the user types, you will always execute it within this kind of little sandbox that you'll never get the chance to do that kind of mischief. But anyway, back to why we don't have quotes. Well, so one of them was we had lots, ComicBase has been around for 30 years, back before a lot of this was even possible. And so by not having things like straight quotes, all the things that computers use as delimiters, we both avoided a lot of aggro, and we also were able to look typographically more correct. Now these days, at this point, we're everything's trapped enough times that we could put straight quotes if we need to, and you certainly could do that, but don't. As a matter of fact, if you do a rebuild of the titles list and things like that, we'll automatically curve your. You might have noticed this if you're putting, the names of characters and you put straight quotes in their names, like Francesco di Alba or something. When you put D apostrophe Alba, that will magically become D curved quote Alba later on once it's gone through any kind of issue cleanup on our end. We'll automatically curve that stuff for you, just the same way that Microsoft Word will automatically curve that stuff for you when you're typing a letter. Anyway, what Michael's problem was in particular was he was trying to first he was trying to add a title that had a quote in it, but then he was trying to get the picture in. And we're not the only people who have trouble. I mean, it isn't just databases that have trouble with curved quotes. It turns out there's certain characters that Microsoft just doesn't like to have in Windows as file names. For instance, you can't have a file name with a colon in it. So if you go G.I. Joe colon a Great American or Aliens colon Resurrection or something like that, you have to call the name of the picture file Aliens dash Resurrection, because there's a list of about a dozen characters, question marks, colons, I think percentage signs, so that Microsoft just won't let you put in a file name. And I believe curved quotes, I believe quotes are amongst them. I know colons definitely are, I know question marks are, and so forth. But whenever those things come up, the easiest thing to do for you in ComicBase, on the other hand, is, let's say I want to put in the pictures for Can't Lose You, and I'd put this in as a straight quote, can't possibly lose you, and you wanted to drag a folder in, and Microsoft was going to give you an error. The easiest thing to do of all this time, though, is if you say show picture file, and you've got your scans of the different pictures you want to drag in, just go ahead and name them after the numbers themselves. Don't worry about the title at all. And if this title hadn't even existed and I dragged a picture called 1.jpg onto Can't Lose You, it would have automatically created the correct folder called Can't Lose You, which ironically, even though it's a curved quote here, Microsoft Windows does not enjoy curved quotes, and so it changes that to a straight quote. But ComicBase will automatically do that mapping for you. You don't need to name anything. So just take your picture, take your scan, call it whatever the issue is called, 1.jpg, etc. Drag it onto the title. It'll make the right picture folder for you, and it'll stick it inside. So that's the very long discussion of how to handle quotes in picture names. Basically, don't just worry about the pictures themselves. And while we're saying that, the thing that everyone runs into is one of the characters you can't have in a picture name for like an issue, which comes up all the time, is a slash. So if you have a picture for 1/A, and let me go to a title that has a 1/A. Oh, well, let's go to our friend Deceased. We've been running that one into the ground all day. All right. So when we look at the pictures for 1/A, 1/A-2, etc., you will notice it is not 1/A, it is 1-A, because you can't have a slash in a Windows file name. If I were to try to change it and put a slash there, Windows would bark at me and say a file can't contain any of the following characters. Slash, reverse slash, colon, star, question mark, double quote, left bracket, right bracket, less than, greater than, or I believe that was left bracket or something. And the reason is because all of those characters are used in Windows batch command script, and that limitation dates way back to DOS. So you will never see a Windows file name with those characters in it, and if you try to put them in, Windows won't let you. On the other hand, ComicBase will figure out that, look, if the title was called 1 illegal character 2, we'll have replaced it with a dash, and so we'll be looking for a picture named 1-A anyway. So it'll take care of it. So just dashes where you can't use the character and move on from there. Hopefully that was somewhat clear. All right, let's go back to the chat and see how we're doing. All right. Can we, yes. Compliment says, can we use the advanced find to do an SQL injection and attack on the database? Just kidding. I don't believe so, because we also use parameterized SQL, on the whole thing to fill the whole thing. You could probably throw an error in the program, but that's about it. And congrats, Steve. Dazinger is the GOAT. Greatest of all time. Well done. All right, so let's see here. Anything else we got to do? And Lance says, my uncluttered keyboard doesn't appear to have the option for curved quotes. Great point. the deal on curved quotes. So once upon a time, we were, you guys might know from ancient history, ComicBase was out on the Mac. And so I was working at Apple at the time, and ComicBase was actually originally developed in a thing called HyperCard, which, to be fair, HyperCard was more of the data storage for the data. Everything that was really done was done as a series of what were called X commands. It was basically custom code that would just take the data that was stored in it and manipulate it to our heart's content and do it, and do stuff with it. But back then, Apple had a really elegant way of handling diacritical marks. So, all the curved quotes, the accented characters, things like that. And the way they would do it on Apple keyboards, if you guys are Apple users, you know this, is you would use the Option key or Alt key, and then it'd be a key that's pretty close to where the regular character is. So, for instance, if I want a curved quote or a not curved quote, I believe it was Alt, right bracket and left bracket on the keyboard, and Alt-Shift, right bracket and left bracket would give you the curved left and right quotes. I believe Alt-4 would give you the, because Shift-4 is the $sign. Alt-4, I believe, would give you like the cent sign. And then there were some other ones that gave you like the pound sign and yen and things like that. And then the other ones I really love are like the M and the N hyphen. So if you're like a diacritical Nazi, you know that, if you're not on a typewriter, you never type dash dash. If you do that in Word, you'll see that automatically takes your dash dash and converts into a long dash. It's called an M hyphen. There's another shorter one used to indicate a range, like 1 through 5. You use that. It's not 1-5. It's 1. It's called an N hyphen because it's exactly as wide as the letter N in your whatever character you're in. And that one is a little longer than a regular hyphen, and it's there to indicate a range. It's not quite as long as an M hyphen, which is as long as a letter M, which is there to indicate like a hard break in a thought. So. Anyway, but the way you get to these ones officially, you get to them by going under Start menu, typing character map, at which point it brings up the ugliest thing you have ever seen. This is straight out of Windows 1.0. I mean, this is barely changed since those days. This is like the fuggliest utility on the planet. But if you dial in, here's your current font, and if you dial in to say Windows Western as your character set, do not use Unicode. You'll go crazy looking for it because Unicode has thousands and thousands of characters. But if you dial into Windows Western, then it will tell you, here's the characters for like, curved left quote, curved right quote, and so forth. And it'll tell you, if you look down here, what you have to type in order to get that. So if I type Alt 0145, somebody at Microsoft thought that was a completely intuitive way of letting you know that if I type Alt 0145, that is perfectly good as a left curved quote, or Alt 0148 that's a great shortcut for right curved double quotes. This, of course, is insane. The Mac guys had it way better, where they used control, like Alt, and then the character that's right next to the character you wanted to get the extended characters. What we do in-house here at ComicBase is we actually use a special keyboard layout. There's a keyboard creator you can find on the Microsoft website, which and I don't know a great way to show it to you on the current on my current monitor for configuration, but down by where the notification area is, you can switch which keyboard you're running in. I've got a choice between English, French, German, English Canadian, because I was testing something for Canada the other day, but also English US ComicBase special key entry. Those are my choices down there. And what that does is, I just created a special keyboard layout which lets me hit Control, because Alt does different things on Windows, but Control and the different characters that I'm used to from Mac, and it automatically types the special characters for me that way. That's how I do it. Happy to pass along that keyboard layout for anyone who really likes this sort of thing. Or you can find the keyboard creator on the Windows site and create your own to map any keys you want to anything else you want and make your own layouts. So that's a thing that can be done. All right, let's see here. Let's see. Okay, Competent Man says, on your site to make content available, is the limitation really just internet speed, or is it more CPU, memory, disk space constraint? No, it's really upstream bandwidth. Discs are easy to get these days. We can throw. I mean, I have a disk array that's acting as a backup for this, for the site. That is, it's not in the petabytes, but it's not 100 miles away. I mean, it's cheap to throw infinite amounts of disk speed at something. No, the problem is where we're at right now is the bandwidth. If you go through somebody like an Amazon Web Services or Google or Microsoft, and you're buying bandwidth from them, we're in kind of like the uncomfortable bracket where when we do bandwidth, because we don't throw out petabytes of data a month, we get charged a pretty healthy chunk per gigabyte down the wire if we're hosting with them. The way we got around that after years and years of paying very large checks to Amazon is we started hosting ourselves again. Then the problem becomes we're limited to the upstream bandwidth of the fastest internet connection we can lay our hands on. And if you guys, if you have your own internet connections, you probably know that in most cases the downstream, like when you're downloading from Netflix, that's much faster than the upstream, like when you're uploading your database to Atomic Avenue. You might have noticed that you can maybe download a 4K movie, from Netflix and a couple of movies, but it might take you, the same 4 minutes to upload a 1 gig file to our servers. Well, that's actually your upstream that's capping on that, because your upstream is our downstream. But our downstream is great. We got gigabit past, almost gigabit past our own firewall. But our upstream is limited to the maximum that Xfinity will give us in our area, which is 40. So we can step around that by parceling out multiple accounts in multiple places where we stash different things so that they're all on their own bits. And then the really big disk images we've got, like the distribution images for ComicBase and the disk images for like the Blu-ray archive editions. We host them with a content delivery network. It's completely off-site from us because it's one discrete hunk of data that doesn't change much, and so we can, basically once we give you the key to get into that one part, you're allowed to download this big hunk of stuff. But as opposed to, like, if I have to, say whether or not you're allowed to download a particular image at a particular size from your download, there was like 4 checks that had to happen for that one thing, and they repeated every week. That sort of thing doesn't very easily lend itself to serving up over these content delivery networks. And frankly, the content delivery networks aren't that much faster. What they are is they're just stable. In other words, they deliver the same 20 megs down or whatever it is, but they deliver it under very heavy load or very fast load. You can't get any faster than that unless you go to very exotic content delivery networks, which get stupid expensive. And by I do mean stupid. Like, when we were fishing around for content delivery networks, they were like, well, our customers are typically looking at a 5-figure bill every month, and is that a comfortable number for you? I'm like, not really. So until you get to that point, bandwidth is something you need to really pay attention to. So that's why we really pay attention to it. Okay. All right. So how are we doing? 501. Damn, we're time again. Is there anything I just was like, damn it, I'm going to answer this? Yeah, there were some, but I'm going to have to save them for another one. I guess that will do it for us for now. But anyway, thank you guys. This went fast as usual. I will see you guys all next week, and we'll take it up from there. In the meantime, I'll do Greg's work for him, and remind there is a board for asking questions. The good news is if you post them there, you might get the question asked even before the live stream. It might get answered by somebody very competent on the site. If there's anything else, let us know. In the meantime, don't forget and tell your friends about the archive upgrade sale. And once again, thank you to everyone who helped make that whole thing possible. It was an amazing thing. So thank you guys, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.